Good morning. We'll get started. Today is February 19th, 2025. We County Board of Commissioners Zoning and Comprehensive Plan Amendment hearing, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Our Chairman, Commissioner Wayne, is currently unavailable this morning. Vice Chairman Pendergrass will be running the meeting this morning. Staff, I'd like to call the first and only case, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Brandon Dunn. I'm the manager of the planning section in DCD. I will be presenting CPA 2024-00007. This is House Bill 1379 for the amendments for House Bill 1379 this morning. This is a county-initiated text amendment. House Bill 1379 was passed by the Florida legislature on May 3rd, 2023 and became effective on July 1st, 2023. Staff was provided direction by the Board of County Commissioners to proceed on May 7th of 2024 with these amendments. The House bill included 8 primary changes to the state statutes that were reviewed to identify any required amendments to the league plan that were necessary to maintain consistency. Before discussing the changes made to the Florida statutes by House Bill 1379, I wanted to provide just a little background about Basin Management Action Plans, or BMAPs. A BMAP is a framework for water quality restoration that contains comprehensive set of solutions to achieve pollution reductions established by a TMDL. Lee County is subject to the Caloosahatchee River and Estuary BMAP and the Everglades West Coast BMAP. Impacts from House Bill 1379 include areas of the county both within and outside of the areas protected by BMAP. The 8 portions of the statutes that required or that had substantial changes to them that we looked at are shown up here. I'm not going to read them to you, but I do want to discuss them briefly. The first section here requires that the county must revise its capital improvement program to identify necessary capital projects to reduce our TMDL or reduce our nutrient loads per the BMAP. We've reviewed this, and based on existing projects we already have on our capital improvement plan, no additional actions were needed. The second part of the statutes require that Lee County must prioritize advanced waste treatment in its sewer services. To address this, the staff has recommended a new policy 56.1.3, or to amend policy 56.1.3 to prioritize advanced waste treatment. The third section, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this one on the following slides, but this is kind of the big part of this amendment. This required us to identify any development of more than 50 residential lots, whether built or unbuilt, with more than one on-site sewage and treatment and disposal system per acre, and determine the feasibility of providing sanitary sewer services within 10 years. To address this, and I'll go through these in a little bit more detail, staff has recommended amendments to Objective 18.3, Policies 1.4.1, Policy 1.4.3, Policy 2.2.1, Policy 23.1, and we are also proposing the addition of Policy 56.2.3 and Table 6. And like I said, I will go back over those. Those were, I know there's public here, and those were the policies that many of the public had concerns with as well, so I will talk about those. The fourth requirement.
May I ask a question? Sure. There, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman? How do they define development? Are they talking about like what you would think of as it's a gated community with more than 50 lots, or are they saying something like just any area where you've got more than 50 lots together, no matter what the lot size? I mean, did they put some parameters on what they're talking about to define that?
There were some parameters. The lot size they put on there are 1 acre or smaller, so it's not just any grouping of 50. But beyond that, it is fairly broad, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's like River Hall where, there's 50 lots within River Hall. Those are all in sewer, so it really wouldn't matter. But it doesn't have to be within a single development. There could be, just a grouping of 50 residential lots adjacent to each other that would have shown up on this map.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
The development is defined under 163. I don't have that definition, but there is a definition of what development is.
Oh, okay.
It's a very broad definition.
Thanks, Michael. Yep. Thanks, Chairman.
All right. The fourth provision here establishes requirements for septic systems in areas subject to BMAP. To address this, staff has recommended amendments to Standard 4.1.2. And this recognizes state requirements. It's not actually a county requirement. Septic systems are permitted currently in Lee County, they're still permitted through the Department of Health. That will be transitioning to the Department of Environmental Protection. But currently those are permitted by a state agency. And just to provide a little bit of additional background on that. So this fourth provision is going to impact the areas that are within these BMAPs. If you have a lot smaller than an acre within these BMAPs and you don't have water or sewer, public water or sewer available to you, you would be required to install an advanced septic system treatment within these areas. So that's what the fourth bullet says. This fifth one here requires local government, subject to the basin plan, which we are, to provide FDEP annual reports on the update of our construction of our sewer system. I grouped the sixth and seventh bullets here because both of them require that Lee County use advanced wastewater treatment facilities. There's just difference in timing based on those two things. There is staff from utilities that can talk about that, but we are on our way to be able to meet that standard. But to address that, we've added policies 56.1.8 and 56.1.9 that provide that we will. The final portion of these amendments is to establish a grant program to fund projects that will improve water quality in these water bodies. To address this, we are adding policy 125.1.9, which encourages use of these grant funds. Okay, so this is that third one here, and I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to read the big part, but just to summarize, as I said, we must identify any development of 50 residential lots, whether built or unbuilt, where more than one on-site sewer treatment and disposal system per acre, and determine the feasibility of providing sanitary sewer services within 10 years. Again, to address these, we propose adding a policy and the table. I don't have the table here. It is in this presentation. It doesn't show up very well, but it is in attachment 1. Staff also recommends amending Objective 18.3, Policy 1.4.1, 1.4.3, 2.1.1. We had a recommendation to 18.3.1, but based on further review, that was not needed, and Policy 20.3.1. These amendments were recommended to accommodate possible future extension of sewer services that may be required.
So real quick, Mr. Chair, may I ask another question? So I guess I'm about definitions because I want to understand it, but determine the feasibility. So what are they looking for there? When they say determine the feasibility, like, can you afford it? Can you build it?
Yes.
Yes.
And then they want that reported back to them as like a report or something? What are they looking for? Is there a deliverable we have to give them?
Is it feasible?
So
That's all the statute says, and it doesn't identify what feasibility means.
And it's within 10 years, so that just has to mean, is it feasible within 10 years, not buildable within 10 years, right?
Yes.
All right. That's interesting. It's kind of unclear. All right, thanks.
It's another state statute that is left unclear.
All right.
So like I said, I didn't bring the table here. It doesn't show up very well, but we do have a map that kind of represents the areas that are shown on this table. This map is not part of the proposed amendments, nor is it required by the state statutes, but it visually identifies the locations of the unserved areas that meet the definition, those 50 groupings of 50 lots built or unbuilt, smaller than 1 acre on septic system. There are 84 areas identified within Lee County that meet the statute requirements. The table includes all the additional information required by the state statutes, including, is it feasible or is it not feasible, distance to nearest transmission lines or facilities to connect to. And so this is the table that we would have to update annually and provide to the FDEP to identify if it's feasible. At this time, the table does not identify any feasible line extensions to lands included on the table due to capacity, distance to existing facilities, or other concerns that result in high cost. So we're meeting our statutes by providing the statutes by providing the table, but the table does not show at this time that any extensions are feasible.
We
Vice Chairman,
considered it.
I'd like to ask a question. If the sewer lines are run in front of someone's property, is the state requiring you to hook to that sewer and water? Is it required by the state?
I'm going to have Nathan answer this one.
Good morning, Nathan Beals, Lee County Utilities. So the current statute does not require connection to water lines that are extended in front of your house if you're an existing customer. If you're building, our land development code requires connection if it's available when you go to build for water. When it comes to sewer, if it's a gravity sewer, it's considered available, and the statute says that once a gravity sewer is installed and the utility notifies you that it is available, you have 365 days to connect.
Okay.
All of these proposed extensions to get to these clusters would be pressurized sewer mains, and the Florida statute does not consider those as available. You wouldn't have to, anybody that's existing wouldn't have to connect. And I don't think even when it's put in, you would have to connect if you're building something new unless it meets certain thresholds within our land development code.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? So did we met the threshold right now for our report by just showing a map with no lines?
This map is-
Just the areas
Yeah.
highlighted is enough to meet the threshold for the state?
Within the
reporting
packet, in attachment 1, there is a table 6 that's attached. That table is what meets the thresholds or the requirements of the statutes.
But that's what creates these maps.
This map is a
Highlights,
representation of the
right.
lands that are identified on that table,
Okay.
just so we can visually see them and talk about if there are anything that want to be discussed. So I want to talk about the LPA hearing. Staff presented the proposed amendments to the LPA. At the LPA hearing, 16 members of the public provided comments concerning the proposed amendments. Concerns included disregard for community plans, encourages more development, cost if required to connect to public sewer systems, and being overly broad. In response to the motion, in their motion, the LPA asked for clarification concerning policy 56.2.3, and based on discussions with staff, recommended transmittal of the amendments with the exception of policies 1.4.1, 1.4.3, 18.3, 20.3.1, and this was done in order to give staff an opportunity to provide additional analysis and revise the staff recommendation if appropriate. So I'm going to go through these policies. We are proposing revised language for policy 56.2.3 based on our discussions with the LPA. There was some, that's why you notice I've been reading this part pretty specifically, because there was something that was missed in the previous policy as far as it didn't say one septic system per acre or something along that line. So we corrected it and basically just aligned it directly with the state statutes. So this policy matches state statutes. Some of the policies that were brought up for concerns as part of the community, they mentioned they didn't think the rural areas should be identified or part of these amendments. Are amendments to policies 1.4.1 and 1.4.3. At this time, staff is continuing to recommend the same changes that were presented to the LPA. You can see the words or the sentences that's proposed to be struck here, and staff's concern is that the amendments will allow for public facilities such as roads, parks, emergency facilities, and utilities. But these sentences that are being stricken could potentially be used to prohibit extending those types of services to residents in the rural community or preserve future land use categories. So we want, out of abundance of caution, we wanted to take those out of these policies. Objective 18.3 and policy 18.3.1. These both address development within the Bayshore Community Plan area. Staff has proposed revised language to narrow the scope of the amendments to Objective 18.3 and is no longer recommending any amendments to Policy 18.3.1. They weren't needed based on the other amendments. The proposed amendments do not impact development that may be allowed within the Bayshore Community Plan area. Policy 20.3.1 addresses development within the Buckingham Community Plan area. Staff has proposed revised language that narrow the scope of the amendments to Policy 20.3.1. And again, staff finds that the proposed amendments do not impact development that may be allowed within the Buckingham Community Plan area. In conclusion, the proposed amendments are internally consistent with other LEAP plan requirements, provide planning tools aimed at protecting and improving water quality. The amendments in Attachment 1 address the concerns of the public and the LPA to the greatest extent possible while maintaining consistency with state statutes. And staff recommends transmittal of the proposed amendments as provided in Attachment 1 and is available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? That question. Can we kind of back up a little bit and just want to, just for everybody that's watching that's not aware of this, can you tell me how this all came about? And this is all state driven, or what's the background of this?
This is state driven. It's came about through the legislator in the 2023 legislative system. So it's a state requirement.
And purposes for water quality, trying to septic to sewer and all that, correct? Utilities,
Yes. Yeah.
Public use, okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, we have some comment cards. We move to public comment. The first speaker, and we have a timekeeper. We have 3 minutes or 5 minutes today for this. 3 minutes, correct?
3 minutes.
Okay, Don Blackburn. Morning, Don.
Good morning.
Welcome
Thank you.
back.
Thank you. I'm here today representing the Buckingham Community Association, and I just want to say, first of all, I wanted to thank the LPA and planning staff for being patient with us and helpful in tweaking the language in the Buckingham plan so that the goal of the actual plan is not effective. And there's only one small area that the House bill really targets, and working with Brandon and Brian in planning, we came up with some language that targets only that area and then leaves the rest of the plan intact. So we're very happy about that. I just wanted to say thank you to them for being so helpful. And with regards to the Buckingham portion of this amendment, we are okay with it. So
Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Darius Cochran.
Morning. I'm glad the planner, the lawyer, and the commissioner agreed that it's unclear. I think it's very unclear. You can read it 10 times, it's very unclear. So here's what happens in Lee County Utilities, for those that don't know. Very close to my home, less than a mile upriver, there's the Auga treatment plant, and it sucks the water out of the Brown River, puts a bunch of chemicals in the brown water, sends it to all East Lee County. and then it goes in all of our homes, bathrooms, restrooms. Then it gets shipped downtown to the waste treatment plant and puts more chemicals in it. And then y'all ship it to the Caloosahatchee River and pump it back in the river. And then it comes back upriver, sucks the water in for fresh drinking water, put a bunch of chemicals in it, ships back down to the wastewater treatment plant. And you guys don't understand the quality of the river unless you live out there. Well, our homes built several homes in Alva on septic tanks, like a year ago. You guys approved it, you approved the septic tanks. There's permits in this county every single week for septic tanks. They're not a bad thing, or you guys wouldn't permit them, correct? This is very unclear. It's not for our community. We all know why this is driven at this point in time in the middle of a zoning. For 5,000 people you're going to bring out to Alva. That's what this is about. Y'all can talk about everything else in the world, but that's what initiated this to be done right now, because in 2 or 3 weeks you guys are going to vote for the zoning to bring 5,000 people on 30-foot homes, 5 feet from the property line, and yet Cape Coral's on 80-foot lots, Lehigh's on a 100-foot lot, but you're going to bring a 30 and 40-foot lot to our community and to our neighbors. That's what this is about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is clarification, somebody's listening. The Lee County utilities actually have 131 wells throughout Lee County, and the no water from Alva all goes shipped downtown. The city of Fort Myers has their own utilities department here, so the city of Fort Myers has their own utilities, which has nothing to do with any deep well injections from Lee County. So when the water is not brought back downtown, because it's the city of Fort Myers. So, next speaker is Amanda Cochran.
Good morning. I understand that the purpose of this action is to ultimately achieve pollutant load reductions in the BMAP areas, and there are several areas of Lee County that should be considered necessary for these type actions. Lehigh Acres for one. This particular proposed action should not be a one-size-fits-all approach for all the areas highlighted in the BMAP. During the LPA meeting back in December over this proposal, there was significant conversation. A better word would be significant confusion among Lee County staff, LPA members, and the county attorney surrounding the concern over the potential for forced hookup to existing residents. I urge each of you to go back and listen to that meeting. After watching it again recently, it became even more clear to me that there was far more confusion than clarity at the end of the discussion, with the most confusion being around that current residents will be forced to hook up to public utilities. And with essentially the same information that we're being provided today, there is a decision being made to potentially move forward with this transmittal hearing. What I did understand clearly, according to the county staff during that same LPA meeting, is that if any resident meets these 3 criteria: 1, you are a resident of the BMAP area; 2, you live on less than 1 acre; and 3, there is publicly owned or investor-owned sewerage systems available, you will be required to hook up to public utilities. The criteria I just described would never have applied to North Olga until a short time ago, when an out-of-town developer with significant political influence applied to change our Lee comp plan with the ultimate goal of increasing density and intensity in the last rural corridor of Southwest Florida. Again, this proposal should not be a one-size-fits-all approach. It is the belief of most of our community that the removal of the language from the comp plan, quote, "These areas are not programmed to receive urban-type capital improvements," because we're not urban, in North Olga is simply a thinly veiled attempt to increase density and intensity to enable 40-foot home sites just 5 feet apart from the property line in the most rural corridor of Southwest Florida. When it's gone forever. We had a comp plan to protect us, and that's what we're changing. House Bill 1379 is well-intentioned. However, through the proposed amendments, Lee County staff appears to be leveraging Florida House Bill 1379 as justification for these proposed changes in our area, despite the law's intent being misrepresented. In our area, this is being done to us, not for us. Please represent us.
Next speaker is Denise Eberly.
Good morning, Denise Eberly, Alva, Florida, also Vice President of Alva Inc., so I'm here to represent the people of Alva also. By removing this specific language in our community plans, it serves as a means to circumvent our LDC and rural future land use community planning goals adopted by the county. The rural areas were not included in the urban FLU to protect and preserve our rural communities from overdevelopment and urban sprawl. The rural areas are meant to remain agricultural per our community planning goals 27, 28, 29. 27 is a blanket goal of the rural communities it encompasses. This amendment railroads the communities, giving preference to developers. The people of North Olga and Alva have been trying to work with the county and developer and landowner. We ask they adhere to the community plan. I'm against this amendment. It will change and degrade our rural communities and lifestyles. Instead of narrowing the focus to address the specific legal requirement, sewer systems, it opens the door to much broader range of development. The amendment removes key language entirely. The sentence being removed, "These areas are not programmed to receive urban-type capital improvements," is a sentence that apparently has profound meaning, further proven by the need to remove it. There are no legal requirements or grounds to remove this sentence to accomplish State Statute 1379. This sentence holds significant meaning in maintaining the integrity and character of our rural communities. It serves as a clear and unequivocal safeguard against urban encroachment, ensuring that rural areas remain protected from inappropriate development that could disrupt the low-density agricultural and natural landscapes we value. A community plan is only as strong as the commitment to its preservation. When it can be amended at a moment's notice, the stability and integrity it provides are compromised. Today, your vote will determine the future of Lee County's rural corridor, a crucial area that is at risk of being torn down or irreversibly altered. I ask that you vote in favor of preserving this land for the benefit of your constituents and Lee County. I request that there be no deletions of language in the Laurel Land Use Community Plan. I oppose this amendment, while presented as a procedural or legally required update, the specific changes in the language used suggest that there are hidden intentions that contradict the original rural preservation area. Furthermore, I would like to raise a critical question. What is the minimum lot size in a rural clustered community? In other rural communities like Buckingham, the minimum lot size is 13,300 square feet. In North Fort Myers, it's 12,750 square feet. I don't believe the intent of clustering in rural areas was meant to be 8 to 10 units per acre. It is being abused, and the definition of clustering is vague and arbitrary and blatantly non-specific.
Denise, you're 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
No trying to get everybody at the same time. Thank you for your comments. Next, Marcia Ellis.
Lovely. Good morning, Commissioners. Marcia Ellis for the record. So on one hand, we have development, and on the other one, we have our tourism industry. I want us to think about those as being two sides of the same bird. So we had a conversation about feasibility and apparently not really knowing what that means. It just so happens in a recent article from February 12th that Vivian Young of 1,000 Friends of Florida offers some advice. The geo-accounting firm Urban 3 provides those services to communities. They've recently released a report, The Economics of Development in Florida. Those conclusions include that low-density suburban development does not produce enough tax revenue to pay for infrastructure liabilities. They advise compact urban growth, such as we have the opportunity to bring to Lehigh Acres. We have compact urban growth in that area, and they deserve our investments. We know that it will pay dividends, and we shouldn't be exploiting the men and women who have worked hard to build this community and live out there and not provide them the services or give them the support to economically develop. This report goes on further to caution against Ponzi economics, in which infrastructure for old development is paid for by new development, which is paid for by new development, which is paid for by new development, because this growth is unsustainable. Growth is not infinite. Let me also say that in rural areas that the cost of infrastructure services are low in these areas. You don't need police or schools for cows. We should also take a look and prioritize advanced treatment. Our sewage systems are a raging disaster. They are spreading PFAS all throughout our community. We in the rural communities appreciate to have our infrastructure free of government control so that we can control the inputs into our system. We don't want car washes dumping into our system. We need to prioritize technologies, and I've shared with the county, and I will share with you all the articles and what I'm referring to for the technologies such as membrane bioreactors, GAC, absorption, and advanced oxidation processes, and commence litigation to bring these technologies into our community and protect us from pollution so that we are not spreading it around in effluent. We need that alternative source, but we need to prioritize bringing in true advanced treatments to our community. Not all growth is good. We have to set some priorities, and while water quality is important, we have to think about the life, the health, and the safety of our community who are being exposed to these PFAS and bring these technologies into our community. Thank you.
Next speaker is Alan Klingersmith. Alan, come on down. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Alan Kleinsmith. I live out in Alva. I oppose the removal of the wording according to the policy that the urban style improvements or capital improvements are not necessary for a rural area. I think it's going to open the door to more intense development out there. And I'd like to point out that that policy has been in effect the whole time that the Neal properties got everything they wanted. It took them a little while. They got the sewer and the water, and they're also looking for more intensity. And that particular policy did not stop them. I think that should stay in there, and we have a case-by-case evaluation like we had with the Neal, and not open it up the entire rural area to development like that. I can tell you one thing, most people in the area do not want sewer and water. We have wonderful wells, we have septic tanks, and we're happy. And that's what the public wants. Thank you.
I have no other cards or any other speakers this morning before we close public comment. Any more public comments closed? Come back to the board. Do you have any questions or discussion with staff or a motion?
I do have a comment about the talk of rural area. I think we need to also remember that there's approximately 2,000 homes on 31 and North River Road in the Babcock area that have been approved and that are going to be on sewer and water. So, you know, we keep talking about a rural area, but yet we have a possibility of over 50,000 residents being within 1 mile of the river. So I think that's what the state is trying to address here, is to say that if we're going to get that growth that is already happening, we should have the ability to supply in the future sewer and water in that area. So I believe that's what they're trying to address here. not just in that area, but in all areas of Lee County and all areas of the state. So, again, it's not a rural area when there's 2,000 homes 1 mile from the river in the BMAP area. So that's approved and coming, and it's going to be on sewer and water. So I just want to make that point.
If I may, so I heard a lot of broad subjects being discussed in public comment, and I think it's easy to try to lump everything together, but the subject of this actual bill, the way I understand it, if the county attorney can verify, this is simply a notification of areas that are being served or not served right now as a requirement of the state, correct? This is not an action plan to install anything. It's just simply identifying what is and what is not, correct?
There are, like Brandon went through, there are a number of different provisions, but with regards to what you're talking about specifically, the feasibility, the statute simply says identify areas that meet certain criteria and then identify, which will be every year, whether it's feasible, whatever that means, to provide the extend these lines to them.
And leave the language.
And that's it.
So, and I do have some friends in the State House, but it is difficult to write a bill that is statewide and is clear for everywhere at once. And so bills get better with time, they get improved, there's fix-it language, which leads me to, all of us can agree, no matter what the subject is, we all want clean water, right? We all want clean water, we all want clean water, we don't want the river to discharge and algae and all the bad things that we want to avoid. So any steps that we can do to improve our water quality, I think everybody would agree on the intent of those things. But this, one of the things that I am hearing with the policy that we're talking about today, when I had my briefing, that the language that we're just talking about, striking the language of the public services, that was actually a cleanup sentence to protect rights for citizens. So could you readdress that? I think there's some lack of clarity that we actually found something that improves the ability for the language for the residents by not stating it the way it had been in the past. It was actually too broad the way it was.
So I believe we're talking about these policies here that discuss the rural and the rural community preserve future land use categories.
Right.
Staff had originally proposed to strike these in the event that we may have to provide service to these areas in the future. In addition, though, I mean, this is a sentence that's kind of I've been looking at for quite a while in the Lee plan, because I grew up in a rural area, and I don't think it's fair that rural citizens are treated differently and don't have this access to the same types of services that everyone else does.
No, that's exactly my point, is you're trying to improve access to service with
Yeah.
this. This is not requiring anybody to do anything. It's just not excluding them from the ability to serve them.
The Neal community rezoning was brought up today, and you know, I do want to say that staff made a recommendation of approval for that one, and that was with these sentences in there. There's nothing in these sentences that would preclude a private developer from running these lines out here. These sentences stop capital improvement or capital
Which one?
spending.
Those are projects
They
that
stop the county from doing
we're
things.
investing in, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Sir,
You got exactly where I was going. See, some of the problems we have with these community plans that were created 15, 20, 25 years ago is people begin to think what they think they say and not what they actually say. These policies, this language is being stricken, doesn't restrict density or intensity in any fashion, as you just indicated. These are statements that if you live out here, the county's not going to be providing these services, these capital improvements. They're not to be expected to be provided by the county. It doesn't restrict the developer from doing it, doesn't restrict developers from density. That's what's actually written.
but the term capital improvements doesn't just mean water and sewer lines. It means a broad array of services.
Roads, everything.
Right.
Right.
Thank you.
I have a question. Michael, on that topic, this amendment, this is countywide, correct? So San Carlos Park, North Fort Myers, Briar Cliff, throughout the county. I know we're hearing from Alva because the big elephant in the room is they future zoning case. If it wasn't that, we probably wouldn't even have a discussion. The point is, this is for the whole county, correct?
Correct.
So I even saw Captiva on the map, so, which is the community plan out there too. So it's not just for one area of the town, correct?
That's correct.
This wasn't created statewide just because of one thing, and I'm curious, going back a couple of years ago, was there any outcry to the legislators when this bill came forward? And was there any pushback? Was there any discussion? And even last year when this was coming forward, I never heard anything about it, so, from that side. So I was curious, I'll find out later, where were they at before? When they were out eating peanuts in Alva, were they talking about this? Or were they just, basically and now it comes before us, and now we're the bad guys, we're passing something that's passing the House bill.
Right.
So,
And you recall on a lot of projects, especially out east, where developers are coming in and putting projects, taking them off the possibility of having these septic systems. And the county has looked at that positively to avoid the impacts of whatever, whether it's negative or not, whether people perceive it or not, the impacts of septic systems.
right. And I totally get it. Living in Briarcliff, for example, with a 350-foot setback from the road, I really wouldn't want to spend $65,000 to connect to the street and spend that money. I had my well, I was happy. I had my septic. We had plenty of acreage between the neighbors, so I was happy with that. But some areas where it's not going to be that way, based upon homeowners, not developers, owners of the property decide to build a house on their property. That's unfortunate, but when you get them that close together, I wouldn't want a septic and sewer, but septic. Anyway, any other discussion?
But the whole goal of this is just to align with state statute that requires us to do this notification of feasibility. That'll be defined at some period of time in the future, maybe more specifically if the bills get cleaned up at the state level, but this is just to align, it's just an alignment bill.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I guess that's kind of where I was going to go, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I think you actually just stated it perfectly, Commissioner Mullica. So basically, we came here today because our staff, we were tasked by the state. The state passed a law, House Bill 1379 in 2023, that said, I believe the legislative intent of this law was to clean up the waterways. And this was a statewide law. This wasn't just a law for Lee County.
If you have a B map, as Brandon went through the criteria, then it applies to your jurisdiction.
Okay, so all of the counties in the state of Florida that have these potentially impaired waterways that are now under basin management action plans are having to react to this state law, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we certainly have 2 basin management action plans because we have impaired waterways in Lee County. And so now we're forced to react and respond to and come into compliance with the state law. So the process was then the staff reviewed the Lee plan to find out where are areas where it's not compliant with state law, and then what amendments can we make to our Lee plan to make it compliant with state law. The thing that I like about the process, we took it to the staff took it to the LPA, and there was a public hearing there, and the public spoke out. And we certainly got a chance to hear from them about concerns that they had with the amendments that were drawn up by the staff. And the LPA responded, and they actually said, hey, take a look at these things. And then what I really like about this is the staff heard what was brought up and the concerns that were brought up, and we actually changed. They didn't just bring us back, here's what we originally brought forward.
They made it better.
We thought about it, and we responded to the public comments that were brought forward, and we tried to answer as many of the concerns as we can. And then they're bringing us some very thoughtful amendments for final adoption. And so, I don't believe that a state law was created just for one zoning case in East Lee County. So I can't answer those comments today, but I do believe we have answered a lot of the other concerns that were brought to us by the public today. So I feel good about transmitting this. Of course, transmittal means we're going to send it to the state for state agency comments, if they have any, and then it'll come back for final adoption. So based on the process that I've seen today and the response of our staff to go ahead and try to make sure that we're coming into compliance in a way that also listens to and takes into account the public comments we've got, I would go ahead and move approval to transmit this to the state today.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Any other discussion?
I just want to point out the advanced water treatment plant, the advanced treatment of water is also part of this bill as an improvement that is noted, was requested and is noted and included in this. So I support this.
Chairman, I'd also like to add too, it was a great point, Commissioner Hammond, that we heard the public, and they went to the LPA board, they worked with it, and obviously we made some changes that the state will still have to approve. But I think it's a great example of showing how the process works. You don't always get what you want, but there is a process, and if you get involved in a process, you try to listen and work within what is required by the state for us to do, and I think Lee County did that, and I'm proud of our staff and the folks on the LPA board for making those changes. So.
Yeah, everybody deserves to be heard, and they were, and they mended where they could. I think that was a good process, so.
We have a motion for a second. Any objections? No objection, motion carries, and we are adjourned.